A24's Horror Pearl uncovers the origin story of Mia Goth's titular villain, but the X prequel is set many decades before the first movie in the duology. Pearl released just 6 months after X due to director T. West co-writing and finalizing the prequel script while producing X. Mia Goth is the only returning actor from the gore-filled X and plays a youthful Pearl, having previously donned prosthetics to portray an elderly version of the character in the horror film series' first installment. 2022's X is one of the most shocking horror movies released in the 2020s so far, and features some of the decade's most inventive scares. West's ambitious movie focuses on a group of young filmmakers, including Mia Goth's Maxine, who shoot an adult film on a rural Texan farm, much to the disdain of the land's 2 elderly owners. One of the owners, Pearl, also played by Mia Goth, is jealous of Maxine's youthful looks and brutally kills the members of her group. Pearl then delves into the backstory of Pearl, showing how she became the murderous woman the characters in X became victims of. When does X take place? X captures the adult movie culture of the late 1970s. Both X and Pearl could be considered period pieces due to the fact neither is set in the modern era, although the periods they're set in are decades apart and couldn't be more dissimilar, which feeds into the themes of both movies, and also is integral to the journey of Pearl as a character. T. West's X is set in 1979, and the movie is purposely made to look as if it was shot in that time period using a more grainy style of film. The setting was a key part of the appeal of the A24 horror movie, as was the profession of the central cast of characters. X focuses on a group of adult movie stars and filmmakers who rent out a barn on the farm of Pearl and her husband, Howard, in rural Texas. The adult film industry was experiencing a boom in the late 1970s, and this context plays into X significantly. Through skillfully written dialogue, the characters discuss much that made the era so significant, including the rising prevalence of certain narcotics, misconceptions about female sexuality, and the prevalence of blatant racism at the time. The decade is also key to the horror aspects of X. Modern horror movies have to contend with the existence of technology like cell phones and social media, both of which means characters have plenty of ways to seek outside assistance when under threat. By being set in the 1970s, X manages to sidestep these problems, making for a much more terrifying experience. What's more, the sexual liberation of the era in general makes an essential backdrop for Pearl's return to murder after the events shown in the prequel, as the era she grew up in couldn't have been more repressed by comparison. What year Pearl is set in? Pearl takes place during the First World War. Pearl movie poster of X prequel. With Pearl being an origin story of X's villain, it was, of course, set before X, though it was many, many decades earlier. The prequel focused on Pearl in her 20s, the older version of Pearl in X is around 80 years old. Pearl takes place in 1918, when America was still in the grips of the First World War, which is where Pearl's husband Howard is throughout most of the X prequel.